Motherfucker. Motherfucker. Motherfucker.
Why we stop here at the SPLC. You should have something like this, and maybe not specifically a fraud indictment, but there should be a comprehensive investigation of every one of these. Media Matters, ADL, SPLC, Right Wing Watch, which is under People for the American Way. That should just be for openers. That should have been for starters at the very beginning. And we are now a year and a half into the second Trump administration. We already have turnover at the DOJ. And it seems that the new acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, he's actually less aggressive than Pam Bondi, which does not really bode well. It's not good. In other words, if Pam Bondi was this slow, she was actually, from what I hear on the inside, she was actually pretty good. And at least she was willing to do some of these things, specifically these indictments against Trump's enemies or against the far left. She seemed like she was totally down to do these things, and it's minimal. Now we have this new acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, and he seems to be even more conservative than her, even slower. So we'll talk a little bit about what's going on at DOJ. We'll talk about the indictment. We're also going to talk about some of the allegations against me. I saw this story come out. Admittedly, it's sort of an old story. It came out last week. We didn't get to cover it. When the story dropped, everybody said that I was involved. There was a story about SPLC paying the far right, paying informants. And so naturally, the pro-Trump MAGA crowd, everybody said, oh, well, that's Nick Fuentes. The reason he's supporting Democrats in the midterms is because he's an informant for the SPLC. And this is what I see in my replies on Twitter for the past week. It's all the usual suspects saying, oh, you took the check from the SPLC, you sold out. And we'll talk about that, too. I addressed it a little bit last night by simply saying, if you Google my name in the SPLC, you'll see that they have been on my case for like 10 years. As long as I've been doing the show, they have been on my case. And I don't mean that they have been negative towards me. I mean, they have tried to destroy my operation, destroy my life. They doxed my address, my parents, my employees, my interns, people that I know. And they've done that for a very long time. But nobody cares, that doesn't really matter. So anyway, so we'll talk all about that. That's going to be our main story. And then we're also going to get a little bit into the war in Iran. The thing about the war in Iran is nobody even really knows where we are with this. The situation in the war is virtually unchanged, which is crazy because I went away for 2 weeks and we were in a position where Trump had just announced a ceasefire.
Oh, hey.
And although the ceasefire had theoretically been agreed upon and was announced and everything, nobody was really sure exactly what the terms were and whether both parties had agreed to the same thing. When I left, there was a ton of uncertainty about what the status of that agreement was. Nevertheless, there is something like a ceasefire still in place. And the ceasefire was supposed to actually have expired last week, exactly this day last week. And as the ceasefire was supposed to expire, because the conditions for the ceasefire had still not been met, Trump announced an indefinite extension of the ceasefire shortly before it was set to expire. And so that is, technically speaking, where we are. If you're following the press releases, the Truth Social posts, the official statements from the government, we are still in the ceasefire phase of the conflict. And this time, we don't even know what it's for. I'll talk a little bit more about that tonight in detail. But if you remember, the original ceasefire said there's going to be a 2-week cessation of hostilities so that Iran and the United States could agree to a comprehensive deal to end the war. That has not happened. And as far as we know, there are no negotiations going on either. So we don't have a comprehensive deal. We're not on our way to a comprehensive deal. It's not even being negotiated. The other major sticking point for the ceasefire was that Iran would have to open up the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping. Well, they haven't done that either. Strait of Hormuz has not been opened throughout the entire duration of the ceasefire for the most part, and still is not open. So if the original conditions for the ceasefire were, we're going to create this allowance so that diplomacy can resume as long as the strait is opened, well, neither of those things have happened, neither of those things are happening. And yet, even though those conditions are unfulfilled, the ceasefire got extended, except this time it's indefinite. The first ceasefire was 2 weeks. They said there's a deadline, another ultimatum. They said 2 weeks to make a deal, 2 weeks, and then we resume the kinetic operations against Iran. Now, it's just wide open. Now it's indefinite. We don't really know where we are in the conflict. We've stopped bombing them, yet the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And now the only thing that has changed is that since the ceasefire expired, the United States has imposed a blockade of its own of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has closed the strait for all other shipping that is aligned with the United States. Now the U.S. Navy has closed the strait, a blockade, for all other shipping that is connected to Iran. And it's not just energy, but it's all international shipping that is in support of Iran. The only difference is our blockade is far less effective because of the operating distance, because of the proximity to the strait, where the U.S. Navy is able to operate in the Arabian Sea. So we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. We're going to get into the state of the conflict and talk about where it is going. But, I mean, like I said, all there is really to say about it is that there still seems to be no strategy here. Here we are, it's the end of April, so it's been actually 2 full months. War started on February 28th, it's April 28th. 2 full months of conflict. Not only have we not achieved any of our objectives, we've actually gone backwards because the strait is now closed. So we achieved nothing of what we sought to do from the very beginning, and then during the course of the war, the strait was taken by Iran. We're not able to get it back. The objectives have not been completed, and 2 months in, we still don't even know what we're doing here. What's the plan? What's the strategy? What even are the aims? Have we retained any of our initial objectives? Or is the only objective now just to end the war itself and try to resign with some dignity? So we'll talk all about that. It's going to be a good show. Before we get into it, I want to remind you to smash the follow button on Rumble, smash the like button, leave a comment, let me know what you think about the show. Check out our merch store at Fuentes.store. We have all of our new products here. And sadly, it is with a heavy heart, truly, that I tell you this. Do we even have it here? I probably should have pulled it out. But if you did not get the Roybets Brats t-shirts, you may never be able to acquire it because it has been removed from the store. There was a copyright strike against the shirt, so we had this Roybets Brats crop top, and we had it for sale when we first launched the collection. We had it on sale last night, but there's been a copyright issue with the actual Bratz company. I don't know who told them that. How did they know? How did they know that we were selling a little shirt with an homage to the Bratz dolls? I don't know how they found out about that. Someone must have told them. I don't know who's responsible for that, but you've broken a lot of hearts. You know, people are going to be devastated by this. There are a lot of young women and young men that are going to be devastated that there are no more Roybets crop tops. Now, if you bought one, you might be okay, but you can't buy them anymore, and I think that's it. So we might try to find a way to sell a different crop top. It's not going to be the same thing. It's going to have to be a little bit different. But for now, the Roybets merch, it's dead. It's gone. No Roybets crop top. Unless you bought one. If you bought one, you're good. Otherwise, I think you're out of luck. Those are now a collector's item. So if you bought them, maybe you want to hang on to them. Those are now a collector's item. Sometimes that's the way it goes. But we still got plenty of other good stuff. We got the vintage distressed America First hat. This is, I think, going to be one of the hottest things. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I think that's going to be a big seller. It's kind of, trendy, new. We got the white America First hat. I'll show you some of my favorites. We're not going to go through the whole lineup. We got the zip-up hoodie with the embroidered AF logo. This might be my favorite. I think this is going to be one of the favorites. Embroidered on the back, America First, with the shield. And then we have the America First shorts. Oops. Very high quality material. These, then they match. They match the zip-up if you want to go for that look. You don't have to. You know, you can wear them together or separately. This one, this is kind of like a varsity. It just says America First. I know it's kind of plain, but high quality hoodie. This is like more, you can blend in with this. You can wear this, and they're not going to clock you. You can wear this at the State Department. You can wear this wherever. You can wear this at Palantir. You know, if you have a job there, you can wear this, and Alex Karp is not going to know. Nobody's going to know. The last one I'll show is we have the Jeffrey Epstein white, the USA quarters in white. And this one's pretty sharp. People were asking for this one, and we finally delivered. We doubled down. And it goes well with the white hat, I think, too. I think of, like, golf. I think if you're on the golf course, this is, like, a good fit. White quarter zip, perfect for after, Memorial Day or Labor Day? I don't even know. I don't know which one it is in May, but this is great, and like I said, it matches the hat. So, we got a bunch of other stuff, too. So check it out, Fuentes.store. High quality stuff. And if you want to support the show, subscribe at AmericaFirst.plus, $15 a month to get access to the entire archive of the show. That's every episode of the show, every commentary stream, gaming stream, collaboration, interview, debate, speech, it's all there. MP3 format, MP3 downloads. And for $100 a month, you get to join the Telegram group chat with me. And I'm in the group chat. I'm hanging out in there, dropping additional bonus content. And people seem to love it. People are dying to get in. So check it out. That's AmericaFirst.plus. Okay, with that out of the way, we're going to dive in. Like I said, though, I feel like nothing's really going on lately. I don't know. Maybe we just need to get further into spring and summer. But I go on the news today, and what are the big stories? There's a visit from the king. Trump is putting his face on the passport, so that's great. And I think that's about it for the news today. I saw that Trump is putting his face on the U.S. passport, and it's like I said last night, it seems like that's all this administration really even does. 10 years ago, you would have found something like that funny. I can't lie, I would have fell for that 10 years ago. During the first Trump administration, if the Trump White House social media was saying that two kings met today, the King of England and the King of America, I would think that was really funny, and they were trolling the left. Then if Trump put his face on the passport and put a portrait of Joe Biden in the White House, but it's actually an auto pen, I would have thought that stuff was hilarious. But when everything else is so bad, when the foreign policy, immigration policy, domestic policy, when all this other stuff is so bad and it's not happening, it almost makes it worse. Not only is it not funny, it's actually like insulting. So that, to me, that was like the big, or I shouldn't say to me, in the news, that was the big story today, is that Trump is modifying the U.S. passport. If you renew your passport, you're going to get a portrait of Donald Trump in the booklet, and it's going to trigger all this conversation in the media about how Trump is really overstepping. Well, this is ridiculous. I can't believe it. It's like, of course you can believe it. It's all absurd. And whoever's going to be the next president is just going to undo all of it the second they get in. And it's all going to be pointless. So, anyway, but we are going to move on. We're going to get into our big story for tonight, which is the major indictment of the SPLC by the Department of Justice. And what I have to say about this is like, okay, finally? Wasn't this the whole point of the second Trump administration? I remember when Trump was running for president in 2024. To me, the only argument that you could even really use to justify voting for Trump is something like this, that he had been royally screwed over in the first term. He was sabotaged from the inside by his own personnel, by the intelligence community, by the FBI, by the Democrats, even by the Republicans. The election was stolen and rigged against him. Then they tried to send him to jail and kill him. They indicted him. They were going to send him up for 115 years in prison, and then ultimately they shot him in the head. And so the argument went something like this. Because of all of that, because of that experience, Trump was going to be the vengeance of America. That we raised up this challenge against the hegemonic left wing in 2016. We won fair and square. We should have gotten change. Instead, we found out the whole system was rigged. Trump had a mandate to govern. We were supposed to get a border wall and a new trade agreement, end the wars in the Middle East. But because of this systematic and structural obstruction, we were effectively denied what we were owed. And so now, because the system is so screwed up and so rigged, Trump was supposed to come back in with a vengeance, having learned his lesson, so to speak. He learned how Washington works. He learned that he can't trust certain people, and now he's pissed off. So now he's not playing around. Now he's going to punch everybody in the face, and we're going to get what we're owed. That was the premise. And by the way, Trump played into that throughout the entire campaign. I remember in 2024, and I'm sure you do as well, he went to CPAC, he went to the rallies, and he said, "I am your vengeance." That was a line they used. And they wrote that line, and that was part of the stump speech, and they knew what they were doing. During the primary in particular, in 2023 and in early 2024, that was the message. Be your vengeance. I'm not just going to be your voice. I'm going to be your retribution, your vengeance. And a lot of people love this idea that Trump was going to come in and he was going to be this burn it all down figure. And he never was in the first term. He would truly be retribution. And then, you might remember, during the general election, they changed the message a little bit. They stopped saying that. They softened the message. Suddenly it wasn't mass deportations and indictments and retribution. Suddenly it turned into stapling green cards to diplomas. And if Iran gets a nuke, we're going to wipe them off the map. And, we have to let people in legally. We need the people. We need the labor, etc. The message changed. Trump gets in. Okay, well, now it's May, nearly 2026, and we don't have any of this. There's no retribution against illegals. There's no retribution against foreign adversaries or allies, for that closest ally, for that matter. There's no retribution against the deep state and the bureaucracy. And so one of the big things that we were looking for in this term was indictments. Is the Trump DOJ going to persecute its enemies in the way that the Biden Justice Department persecuted theirs? Because what did Joe Biden do when he got into office? Almost before he got into office, they started charging people. The DOJ hired 1,000 judges, 10,000 FBI agents, and they went after everybody that was involved in January 6th, everybody that was involved at every level. And they started going after people from the Trump administration and the Trump campaign. And they started going after Trump himself. And so this was a serious, comprehensive, lawfare campaign to systematically destroy the MAGA movement. And this went on throughout 21, 22, 23. Trump administration gets in. We don't have nothing. No indictment on Obama, on the Clintons, not using the Epstein files for that matter, not using it against. Today we just got something against James Comey, tried to do it against a couple of other officials, but it fell through. Finally, last week, and this is the good news, finally the DOJ announced a major indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center. And this indictment is sort of interesting because it reveals the true nature and the activities of the far left. So Southern Poverty Law Center is one of these legal activist organizations started up in the civil rights era, and it was supposed to be one of these groups that defends the rights of the minorities and the oppressed. They came up in the civil rights era, and they were defending mostly black people from civil rights violations, but it was also Jews and all the other disaffected, so-called marginalized groups. The indictment against the SPLC alleges that they committed fraud because of a program that they have been running for almost 50 years. It's effectively a counterintelligence program. So you think of the SPLC and you think of legal activism. You think of how, for example, one of their activities, they have a program called Hate Watch, where they monitor hate organizations, hate speech, extremist groups. That's one of their activities. They also represent people in the event of a civil rights violation. I believe they brought some of the civil litigation against the Charlottesville organizers, and they supported that. So these are some of the activities that they're known for and that you might imagine that they get up to. But this indictment, again, alleging fraud, reveals that not only do they do all these ordinary things, but they also have been paying informants under the table to the tune of millions of dollars, upwards of $3 million, to effectively go into far-right extremist organizations, allegedly to spy on them. So over the decades, they have been paying people in the Ku Klux Klan, in the National Socialist Movement, people that attended and organized Charlottesville, all of the major so-called hate groups, neo-Nazi, white nationalist, Christian identity, groups like this, they have been paying people inside those organizations, in many cases, like lots of money, like a full-time salary, part-time or full-time salary. One individual is paid more than $1 million. That's a lot of money to be a deadbeat in the Klan or something. And paying these people allegedly to spy on the activities of those organizations. The DOJ says that that constitutes fraud because the SPLC is representing to their donors that they're fighting extremism, hate groups, hate speech, when in reality, no matter what you call it, whether they're informants or whatever, they are not being forthright about it, they're not being transparent about it. They are clandestinely and secretly giving money to those very same far-right organizations. And they're using what could be illegal accounting tricks to hide the money trail, to hide the paper trail for those disbursements. And this is a story, this is from the Associated Press. We'll just go through some of the details here. It says, quote, the Southern Poverty Law Center was indicted Tuesday on federal fraud charges alleging it had improperly raised millions of dollars to secretly pay leaders of the Ku Klux Klan and other hate groups for inside information. The Justice Department alleges the civil rights group defrauded donors by using their money to fund the very extremism it claimed to be fighting, with more than $3 million paid to informants through a now defunct program to infiltrate white supremacist and other extremist groups. The civil rights group faces charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering in the case brought in the federal court in Alabama. The group said the program was used to monitor threats of violence, and the information was often shared with local and federal law enforcement. The indictment includes details on at least 9 unnamed informants paid by the SPLC through a secret program that prosecutors said began in the 1980s. Within the SPLC, they were known as field sources, or the Fs, according to the indictment. One informant was paid more than $1 million between 2014 and 2023. $1 million over 9 years, that's like a 6-figure salary practically. And that individual was affiliated with the neo-Nazi National Alliance. Prosecutors say another informant was a member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. The informant attended the rally at the direction of the SPLC and helped coordinate transportation for several others. That person was allegedly paid more than $270,000 between 2015 and 2023. So the first thing I want to say about this, and this is just, at this point, what even do you say? The first thing I want to do is clear the air. So this story comes out last week. This is an old story. And it's what I just read to you. The DOJ is indicting SPLC for fraud because of this informant program. They say it's defunct, but it's been operational since at least a few years ago. And basically, the SPLC caught wind of this investigation. It started in the first Trump administration, shelved under Biden. came back in Trump 2, and I believe the SPLC wound this program down because they caught wind that this was going to be a problem for them. So it says it's defunct, but not really. It's only they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and then they had to cover their tracks. But in any case, the story comes out, and almost immediately after the story comes out, people start to say that I am one of the field evidence. What do they call it? Source. Particularly the one I just named that went to Charlottesville. And I'll reread that last paragraph for you. People started to say that this person was me. The story comes out. We don't even have all the details. We have the indictment, but this is the part that everybody said was me. It says, quote, another informant was a member of the online leadership chat group that planned Unite the Right. The informant attended the rally at the direction of the SPLC, coordinate transportation for several others. That person was paid $270,000 between 2015 and 2023. Everybody immediately took that. All the pro-Trump influencers, there's no evidence. It doesn't even make sense. We'll talk about why. But that little blurb, because that is what is in the indictment, they sort of break down of the informants. That little blurb, everybody said, oh, that must be Fuentes because he was at J6. Now we're hearing about the SPLC. Oh, the far right was always a spook. And I want to talk about it, about me in particular, but I also want to talk about the far right in general. Let's just talk about me in particular first. So, just for anybody that is curious or in doubt or anything like that, first of all, the details don't even make sense. The indictment says this person was paid from 2015 to 2023. In 2015, I was 16 years old. Okay? I turned 17. I was a junior in high school in 2015. Okay? And I wasn't even far right. In 2015, I was like a libertarian. I thought Trump was too far right. Okay, so that's for openers. They said this person between 15 and 23 was paid $250,000. Okay, well, me, I was in high school when that started. That's one. Two, as it pertains to Charlottesville, and I've told the story a million times, I didn't even actually go to Charlottesville. And you might say, well, what does that mean? It was a last-minute decision. I did not organize Charlottesville. I didn't know any of the leaders in Charlottesville. At that time, I was 18. I was 18 when Charlottesville happened. I was a college dropout. I had no connections. And I made a last-minute decision to go about 2 or 3 days before the rally. I wasn't even in the city for the Tiki Torch March. And by the time I landed the day of the actual protest, by the time I got to my hotel, the whole thing was already over. I literally just got there late. And I could show you receipts for that. I could show you proof. But I've told the story. It's been consistent for like 10 years. I showed up at my hotel at like 11 a.m. the Saturday of the rally. By that time, the police had already dispersed it. I got there late. Everybody was getting chased out of the park. I went with James Alsop, a handful of other people. We were there for like a half hour, then I went back to my hotel. So none of those details even make sense. One other thing, which is a little bit relevant, I have been at war with the SPLC for my entire career. And they have done horrible things to me. Least of all, including, they doxed my assistant, who went by the name of Jude Groiper. This was my only full-time employee. They doxed him. 2 of my interns that were working on Capitol Hill for Paul Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they doxed those people. The biggest one and the best one, though, is that in 2022, they are actually the group responsible for doxing my home address. You remember this? You might have heard about it. About a year and a half ago, I put out a tweet after the election. I said, your body, my choice. It went super viral. It got 100 million views. Because the tweet generated so much outrage, people found my address, and hundreds of people, that's not an exaggeration, started showing up to my house, knocking on my door, throwing eggs at my house, doing all kinds of things, recording my house, honking their horn, whatever. And it led to someone trying to kill me. A young man, 23-year-old man, came to my door with a gun. After he killed 3 people already, he killed his best friend's mom and sister, And then he drove 3 hours to my house, to my front door, marched up to the front door with a gun, with the intention of killing me. Okay? All of that happened because in 2022, when I actually moved into my new address, the SPLC posted my house. They posted a picture of my house on their website, and they linked to my address. They interviewed my neighbors and published about my whereabouts, when I come and go, what floor I live on. And I'll read you, this is from the article, you can Google it. The headline is, Nick Fuentes trades parents' basement for pricey live streaming den. Pricey live streaming den. It was a $390,000 3-flat in Berwyn, Illinois. Okay? Pricey live streaming den. It's not. This is like a working class neighborhood. That's not that much money. It's a 3-flat apartment building. They say pricey live streaming den is crazy. You would have thought it's like some $1 million single family home in like Park Ridge or Hinsdale or Elmhurst. Pricey live streaming den is crazy. Yeah, he bought an apartment building in Pilsen. He's living like a real king, this guy. Anyway, so that's the headline, trades parents' basement. I think I was 22 when I moved out. I know that's totally insane to live with your parents when you're 22. Anyway, but this is the article. It says, quote, Hate Watch spoke to several of Fuentes' neighbors whose names are being withheld over concerns they may be harassed or targeted by Fuentes' followers. You're interviewing my neighbors. It says on the topic of Fuentes, most of the neighbors Hate Watch spoke with say the live streamer who pumps out vociferous white nationalist propaganda on his live streams appears meek in real life, keeping to himself, apparently entertaining few visitors, and does not call attention to himself. Several said that when he is at his home in Berwyn, his movements appear to be limited to passing from his garage to the back door of the apartment. Fuentes' building is located on a quiet tree-lined street, a short walk from one of Berwyn's main shopping districts. On the block where the white nationalist 2-story building is located, Hate Watch observes his neighbors doing weekend chores and children playing in yards and on sidewalks. From the property's exterior, Hate Watch observed the basement apartment and the first floor was empty. They're literally looking through my windows. On the second floor, the blinds were drawn. Hate Watch also observed a construction permit on the window of the first floor of the building. Neighbors confirmed Hate Watch's impression that the basement and first floor appear to be currently unoccupied, with Fuentes and his live streaming operation on the second floor. On another visit, a Hate Watch reporter knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. So look, I'm not one to complain. You know that about me. One thing you know about me is I don't complain. I hate complaining. But how messed up is it? How messed up is this? This is insane. This is fucked up. And this is totally insane that a far-left political group with $1 billion in cash is posting for everybody to know where a person lives with this much detail. This is insane. We looked through his windows. This floor is unoccupied. We think he lives in the second floor. We talked to his neighbors. We knocked on the front door. These are his habits. These are his whereabouts. This should be illegal. What is the purpose of this? It's not like they're reporting on my rhetoric or my show or my operation. You're literally telling everybody, this is where he lives. Get him. If you want to kill this guy, this is where he is. This is where you can find him. This is where you can physically hurt this person. That's all that is. And everybody knows that. That is like a soft form of homicide. Because that is what they're doing here. They're trying to incite people to kill me. They're saying, if you want to mess with this person, harass this person, intimidate, assault, murder this person, this is where you can find them. That's what it is. While simultaneously saying, he's a vociferous white nationalist, but he's evil, his fans are insane. Okay? But then it gets better. If that's not bad enough. So this super rich organization is just doxing a civilian, doxing a citizen. That's not bad enough. They get what they want, okay? The docs exist because of the SPLC, and when I get in controversy, people start showing up, and yeah, someone tries to kill me, and now a young man is dead. Not this young man, but the person that tried to kill me was killed by police. Now, fast forward a year and a half later, and people are seriously saying that I'm getting paid by this organization. People are saying, oh, you sold out to the SPLC, you took money, oh, now I see why you support the Democrats, you're an SPLC informant. And no one will ever know, and no one will ever care, because that is the nature of the information space. These pro-Trump influencers, they do not care about the truth, they have no integrity, they're all being paid. They have identified me as somebody that is contrary to Trump, contrary to the Republican Party. And so because I am the enemy, now they're just going to put that out there. They don't care that it's not true. Laura Loomer, all these other people putting this stuff out, this is just going to be another one of those things they say about me. Just like the J6 thing. Oh, that SPLC, oh, I heard he was with the SPLC. But it's just one of those things that the repetition they put out there, and nobody knows the SPLC is responsible for almost taking my life. I have to move because of them, because they almost killed me, and now I'm going to be tarred for the rest of my career with this insinuation that I'm also being paid by them. So even if somebody tries to kill you, they're still going to say you're being paid by them. Okay? And by the way, here's the other part that's even better. All these people that are saying that, they never got targeted by the SPLC. The SPLC is only one among many groups that are like this. There is the SPLC, there is the ADL, there is the Media Matters for America, there is Right Wing Watch, Project for American Way, Atlantic Council, Digital Forensics Lab. You have all these different outfits, you have all these different NGOs, nonprofits, activist groups, and their job is to put the screws in the far right. Through whatever, it's like guerrilla warfare, paying informants, doxing you, going after your payments, going after your family, your associates, bringing the government down on you. They don't play fair, they don't play nice. This is what they do. And the rich irony in this is that the center-right people that are accusing me and others of being fads or informants for the SPLC, they never get targeted by the far left. Never get censored. All these people that are saying this, take like Chris Rufo and Lomez, for example. These are two guys that have a show on the Blaze. Lomez, his real name is Jonathan Keeperman. He's at Passage Press. Christopher Rufo's at Manhattan Institute. They have been putting that kind of stuff out there, that the far right are all feds, they're with the SPLC, whatever. These are two center-right guys that have a job at the Blaze, have a job at the Paul Singer-funded Manhattan Institute. They've never been censored in their lives. They never got banned on Twitter. They never got banned on YouTube, and they still aren't. They never got banned on PayPal. They never got banned on Stripe. No one ever tried to kill them. They never got boxed.
Oh,
and
shit.
This is the classic.
Oh,
because here, I'm trying to paint a picture here for you. This is the classic.
Come on.
Which is that the center-right
Why can't I have a gun?
works with the far left against the far right every single time. The far left wages war on the
I can't
far
get his
right,
gun?
and the center-right
How fucking
joins
dumb
them
shit
hand
is
in
this,
hand.
bro?
So, for example, the far left wants to censor the far right. The center-right won't defend us.
Oh,
Like
come
for
on.
years.
Whatever.
The center-right, for a decade, would say, we're against cancel culture, we're against censorship. They never got censored, and they never got canceled. They remained gainfully employed, and they had all of the platforms available to them. The people that were being canceled and censored were the Proud Boys, the alt-right, Red Ice, TRS, Richard Spencer,
They're
people
all
like
Sentinels.
myself. Did Ben Shapiro, did the people
Mafia
at
Sentinels.
CPAC, did the Blaze, did any of them ever stick up for us? No. No, because they were in a handshake agreement with the far left. The far left wants the far right destroyed, and that means that you get this very moderate and weak and flaccid center right that isn't really a
Damn
threat.
it! I fucked up!
The center right allows this because then they are protected on their right flank. Whereas someone like myself would challenge Charlie Kirk or Ben Shapiro and say, you're not
Go,
right-wing
bro.
enough, you're not pure enough, you're not giving the people what they want, whereas we would ordinarily be in competition
Excess.
on the college campus, on the social platform. Now we are taken out of
How
the
can we have no
equation,
weapons,
and now
bro?
there's
That's
no
so fucking
competition.
weird.
Think about it. For many years, who did Ben Shapiro have to compete with? Nobody. Because everybody else was banned from Facebook, Instagram, YouTube for the better part of the last decade. It was the institutional center-right establishment right-wingers that literally cut deals with Facebook. And they were the biggest ad providers. Daily Wire was the second biggest ad buyer on Facebook for like 5 years. They cut deals with Google. And the deal was that as long as they didn't say anything conspiratorial about the vaccine or the pandemic, they would keep their channels. Meanwhile, everybody else got cut down for one thing or another. Election denial, COVID conspiracy, anti-Semitism, white nationalism, whatever. So that was always, they were always in bed together. That's the irony. The center-right will say that the far-right is paid
How
by
these
the
niggas
feds.
like
The
so
far-right
good?
is controlled by the far left. Or they'll say something like the far left and far right are in a symbiotic relationship. They'll say that the far left funds right-wing extremism because right-wing extremism creates the impetus for far left action. In other words, if the far left funds the Ku Klux Klan and the Ku Klux Klan does a big visible public rally, then the far left is going to say, oh my gosh, the Klan is on the rise.
Fort Iron,
They'll see more money.
Vice City, bro.
People say the same thing about the ADL. They say that people that criticize Israel are actually friends with the ADL because the more vocal and visible and sensational the anti-Semitism is, the greater the need.
It's like I never played GTA 5 before.
For
So
the ADL. And so this is a claim by the center-right that the far-right and the far-left
so
are
exciting.
in a symbiotic, mutualistic relationship. The reality is the opposite. The center-right is in a mutualistic relationship with the far-left. And here is the case in point. For years, the far-left was putting the screws in the far-right with censorship, with doxing, Antifa, showing up and disrupting the rallies, using violence, calling down federal law enforcement on the far right. And the center right stood by and watched, and in many cases participated in this. It was not a few times that center right figures would pass along things that I had said or information about me from far left groups, so that then they could sabotage me and basically do the dirty work of the center-right. And the reason that you know this is because the center-right always uses the language of the far left. When the center-right wants to cancel the far-right, what do they say about us? They say we're the real Nazis. We're the real Klan. We're the real white nationalists. We're really engaged in hate speech, and that's why we have to go. Sean Hannity said that on his program this week. Mark Levin said it this week. Both Hannity and Mark Levin said on their shows, Nick Fuentes needs to be censored. Sean Hannity said, I should not have a platform. Mark Levin said we should censor more hate speech. Well, who drives all of that? Who is driving hate speech legislation? Who's driving even, let's say, the monitoring of hate speech? Who's on that far-right beat that's creating all of the hysteria about that? It's the far left. So, on the contrary, and this is why I said we need to talk about me in particular, and then this conversation in general, there is this ongoing dialectical conversation about the far left, the far right, the center left, the center right, and how they're all interacting. And that is the narrative that people are uncritically consuming. I'm sure you've heard it before. People say that really anybody to the right of Tucker Carlson must be a federal operative. Anybody to the right of Sarah Palin, anybody to the right of Sean Hannity is a Fed, or is, like Tucker himself says, they're in a symbiotic relationship with the ADL. They're simply creating the crisis that the far left is there to address. But when you actually think about it deep down, it couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually the
What is
opposite.
this shit?
And that is the narrative that we saw over the past week, which is
Oh,
what
the iron?
exactly? All of the pro-Trump influencers, which, let's just say it, Trump is center-right. The Republican Party, the MAGA movement, the Trump movement is center-right. It just is. They're not immigration extremists. They're not isolationists. They're not even social conservatives. How many gay men are in the Trump administration? They support government funding of IVF. They gave up on abortion. They're not even social conservatives. They're saying about immigration, we only want to remove the criminals. We don't want a mass deportation anymore. They gave up on the border wall. We're in a war with Iran, which was cheered on by all the legacy press. So the institutional right, establishment right, center right, Republican Party, Trump, they are the center right. Everybody that is supporting the Trump movement is center right. And all those influencers are now saying, we have this SPLC indictment, and they're saying, well, Charlottesville was funded by the left. The far-right extremists were funded
I want my car. Where's my car at?
And they're licking their chops, and they're saying, see?
There's my car.
We told you so. Anything to the right
Oh,
of
that's
Trump,
so hot.
anything critical of Trump,
Do I own this shithole?
anything
I
right
do.
of the center, anything
I
critical
own
of the
this
center
shithole.
is actually an operation. It's legitimate. You can't trust it. Don't look at it. Don't go there.
It's better with spoilers.
But it is just true. I would say in the first
Oh,
place,
get out my way,
the
man.
SPLC is funding a handful of informants in basically defunct organizations. Have you even heard of any of these? Have you ever even heard of the National Alliance? Because I'm in the far right, but that's basically a defunct organization and has been. The Klan? When's the last time you saw a Klan rally? Is the Klan really an operative force in American politics? No. National Socialist Movement? All these groups that the SPLC had informants in are basically irrelevant, first of all. Second of all, I don't even think it's necessarily a lie to say that they were funding those informants to gather intelligence. Because that is what the SPLC does. So I don't even consider that to be relevant to the conversation. It's not like they were funding AFPAC. They weren't funding the Groypers. They weren't funding the Proud Boys. They weren't funding InfoWars. They weren't funding, in other words, any of the groups that would be considered right of center and politically effective or viable or legitimate. They were not involved in any of that. It was all of the fringe, skinhead type stuff from maybe 20 or 30 years ago. But more to the point, they like to say, well, the SPLC and the far right, they're two sides of the same coin. There's this horseshoe. And I want to focus on something specifically. This is something that Tucker Carlson has said. Not about this, but about actually the ADL. This is an idea that you hear all the time. Tucker told me in person, he said, Netanyahu likes you. And I almost want to say, well, how do you know that? When you talk to him? But he says, Netanyahu likes you, and I know that. He goes, and the ADL likes you. And I know that. And he says on his show, why does the ADL, why do Netanyahu, why do they like the so-called real anti-Semites? Because the so-called real anti-Semites create the pretext for the ADL to pass hate speech laws, for the ADL and groups like it to attract donors, to attract sponsorship, to carry out their various programs. It creates the need for the ADL. But I would say that obviously when you look at the nature of ADL and the far right, SPLC and the far right, how can it be considered symbiotic or mutually beneficial when the ADL and SPLC are censoring us? In other words, if they had it their way, we would be dead. How could I be in a symbiotic relationship with the SPLC?
Where the fuck is it at? Oh, in trash?
If they're posting my address on the internet.
Oh.
If they had it their way, someone would come to my house and kill me. Someone tried to. And if I answered the door, he would have shot me in the face, and I would be dead.
10 penny, you
So
motherfucker piece of shit.
how is that a mutualistic relationship? If the ADL had it their way, I would be banned on Twitter. They got me banned
I
on
gotta get
Twitter.
that green saber, bro.
The same week that I was banned in July 2021, the ADL put out an article about me 5 things
The
you need
Tula?
to know about
Okay, bro. It
acquaintance.
should have been a Saber.
And that is how
Well,
I
I'll
was
let it
banned
pass.
on Twitter.
I'll let it
That is how I was
pass.
banned on
Go
PayPal,
GTA 6.
on every major platform. In other
It's got
words,
red tires? No, it doesn't.
if they had it
Well,
their way, we would not exist. We
where's
would
my
not
guns
have a phone.
at,
We
bro?
would not have a megaphone.
That's fucking
We would not
gay.
even be alive. If they had it their way, we would be gone. And why is that?
Oh,
Because
God.
what we are putting out there is contrary to their message. If we are winning,
Oh, okay, okay, okay,
we are creating an electorate, or we're creating
Oh, my God.
a countryist
Fuck.
movement in government that is going to oppose Israel, liberalism,
Shit.
all these different things. The civil rights regime, which sounds bad if you say you oppose that, but the civil rights regime is very far-reaching.
Throw a sticky on.
If we have it our way, we're going to politically
Oh, fuck you.
all of those things.
Fuckers.
That is why they exist. We are in a war with them. We're in a battle. And so that's like saying, if the United States kills the
Oh, my
Ayatollah,
Jesus.
we're in a symbiotic relationship with Iran, because every IRGC member we kill, that's recruitment for them. And every time they
What the
close the Strait
fuck?
of Hormuz, that creates a pretext for the United States to whatever.
He's going to the Grove? Oh,
Just
my
because you're
God.
in a pitched conflict does not mean there's a
This
mutually
is
beneficial
fun, bro.
relationship.
Fuck.
Let's examine, however, the
He
relationship
didn't flip it over the bridge. He's on bridge. It's so gay.
Why
So
are the
fucking
ADL and
gay.
the SPLC not interested in the center right?
He got
Because the
sticky
center
on
right does not
That-
oppose
Fuck that guy.
of the ADL and the SPLC.
Leave the-
What are the
leave
political
Grove
ends,
Street.
for example?
Don't
of
do it,
the
man. He's
ADL?
done.
Well,
He's
they're very clear.
not do a sticky at that motherfucker. He's done.
ADL says our job is to protect Jewish people from anti-Semitism and to support the state of
I
Israel.
support this mission. It's fun.
Well, the center right believes in all
Cute.
of that. The center right is liberal. So that means when you see Jewish oligarchs taking over America, they call that a meritocracy. They say there's nothing wrong with that. God bless Sheldon Adelson for making his fortune in casinos and using hundreds of millions of dollars to bribe politicians. That's his right as an American. As liberals, they will not identify Jews as a distinct group, because liberalism says that we're all individuals, we're all a blank slate. As liberals, they will
Damn
never
it.
identify Jews as a separate, distinct nation with a meaningful identity, a meaningful sense of togetherness, a sense of nationhood.
Oh my God. Get out of my face, nigga.
And how that is going to influence society with Jews acting as a whole. They'll never identify that, and so that is why they will always support the civil rights regime, which protects Jews. And
Isn't there a Saber inside GTA 5?
and their collective
I bet it'd
action
be a
as a group.
Saber. Huh?
The center
fuck,
right will
dude.
never oppose Israel. Why? Because the center right is funded by Israel. Who is the center right funded by? Fox News, Wall Street Journal, New York Post are all owned by Rupert Murdoch. Murdoch is friends with Netanyahu, funded Netanyahu's re-election campaign 5 years ago. Those are all the center right publications.
Go to my hidey hole. My hidey hole.
Merger of the Blaze and CRTV, that's run by Glenn Beck, who cried because Israel wouldn't give him citizenship. He said God gave him a mission, and that's to defend Israel. Breitbart, which used to be great, now the editor-in-chief is Joel Pollack, who broke the Sabbath to say kill all Palestinians on October 7th. He's a Jew immigrant from South Africa who studied Jewish studies at university and converted his black wife to Judaism.
No fucking GTA 4. I'm kind of pissed about
The
that,
New York
man.
Post, the Blaze, CRTV,
Should have been shot about
and
GTA 4,
Breitbart.
man.
Then you've got Daily Wire, need I say more? That's your center right. So who's really in a symbiotic relationship with the far left? The far left, if they had it their way, would kill the far right, and they have. The far left has waged a war against the far right to censor, dox, cancel, kill, maim, all these things. The center right has been complicit in all of this, has been immune from all of those things, and that is
You got
because
right,
the
nigga?
far
Hell
right
yeah.
is meaningfully
So gangster, bro.
opposed to the far left, whereas the center right does not.
Am I talking to Franklin? What is the point of this shit, bro?
And they will criticize Israel,
Fucking
Jews, or
weird.
the civil rights regime. They will do all of it within a liberal framework.
Nostalgia
So,
bears.
for example, when they talk about replacement migration, they don't say white people are being replaced by non-white people. And there's an element of the whole here. there's an element of identity here. America as a white nation is different than America.
Should have been Madras, so not fucking
It's not
Franklin.
because of culture. It's not because of ideas or entrepreneurship or the Bill of Rights.
My
It's
spot.
because
The
we're
fuck is
different.
this?
Tribes are real. Race is real. We're not born as individuals on a blank slate. We carry with us a genetic inheritance. Our behaviors, our physical traits, our cognitive traits are genetic as well as learned, as well as environmental. And maybe it's 50-50. Maybe it's more genetic than it is environmental. That's an illiberal idea. The center-right will say we don't oppose replacement migration because whites are being replaced by non-whites. They will say we oppose replacement migration because, their values are different, or it's a voting rights issue, or they need time to assimilate, everything other than what it is. And the same goes for Jewish power. Will they say that we have a Jewish power problem in America? That Jews as a collective have too much influence? And that Jews, because of their identity, abuse their influence for their own tribe rather than the nation as a whole? No, they never say that. They say it's not about Jews. It's not about Judaism. It's not even about Israel. They say it's about Netanyahu and Netanyahu's government and the things he's doing. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have a problem. Well, again, that's not true. And by the way, the ADL doesn't even disagree with that.
I'll take
the ADL, the
AGs,
SPLC,
nigga.
they don't like Netanyahu either. They work institutionally with Israel, institutionally with Jewish oligarchs in America. So in other words, the center-right is not even really saying things that the far left disagrees with at all. And that's why they don't oppose one another. So this is your SPLC indictment. These are some of the bigger
good,
ideas.
bro.
Like I said, as far
I'm
as the
good, bro. I don't
actual
wanna do this
indictment
shit.
is concerned, I'm a lawyer, and people say that the actual charges are on shaky legal ground. I don't know that the fraud charges are going to stick. I don't know that it's going to deliver a death blow to the SPLC. Either way, I support it. I think the DOJ should be doing more of this. I think the DOJ should bring charges against all these far-left groups, SPLC, ADL, Media Matters, all of them. Because these are the various organs of the left that are preventing the rise of the far right. If it wasn't for the far left, we would have free reign. I mean, are you kidding me? I think about all the things I have had to put up with over the years in the form of debanking, censorship, taking away credit card processing, all the problems they have created, even just guilt by association, smear campaign. If the far left were out of the picture, we would have a very easy time at everything. So the Trump administration should really be doing a lot more. It should not just be some Mickey Knack fraud charge against the SPLC. It should be comprehensive. They should all pay like this, and I do support it. But to me, the bigger picture, like, what's the story? The Trump administration should fight the left more? Obviously. The bigger story is about how this has now been used, and now this has become a narrative among the pro-Trump influencers, and now they like to say, see, all that exists is the far left and the Trump movement. If you're not voting for Trump, if you're not glazing Trump, if you're not defending everything Trump does, then you're with the left. And what that implicitly says is there are no enemies to the right. And don't mistake what I mean by that. This is a Straussian idea. That's their playbook. They say there is nothing to our right. If we have enemies, they are more left-wing than us. There is nothing more far-right than the Trump movement, and that is not true. There is something more far-right than the Trump movement. Trump is not the be-all, end-all of the far-right. Obviously, if you've been watching my show for a long time, you know that, and if you have a clue, Trump movement is not doing what the far-right wants, but they will categorize and say anything that's far-right is actually on the left. It may appear to be far-right, it may appear to be more right-wing than Trump, but in actuality, it's third worldist. In actuality, it's funded by the left. In actuality, it's a mirage, and it exists to create a pretext for far-left organizations. And all of these are little discrediting, delegitimizing lies so that nobody looks for a better option. So that the masses stay on the plantation, shrug their shoulders, and say, this is as good as it gets. I guess we're only going to vote Republican. My ideology is loyalty to Trump. The unironic, most right-wing thing you can do is vote for Republicans. All you can do is vote for Republicans, and that's it. And the far right will say, no, we need entryism, we need infiltration, we need people to become very far right, we need the best and brightest young men with energy to get involved in politics and to ascend the ladder in power. And yes, the SPLC, ADL are going to be our biggest enemies. I'm their biggest enemy. And that's why, the people that I influence, they try to get those people fired. And they're out there. We have personnel all over the government, all over society, and the SPLC would love to get their hands on that because they want to hurt those people, because those people actually oppose their ideological ends. They're not worried about John Doyle. They're not worried about how many of these other people, Laura Loomer, the rest of them, they're just not worried about that. So anyway, that's the SPLC indictment. And I think that's everything I have to say about it. We're going to move on. We're going to talk a little bit about the situation in Iran. I don't know how much time we're going to spend on that. I think we're almost out of time here, but we're going to get into it a little bit. It's been a few weeks since we covered the situation in Iran. I think the last time we spoke was the beginning of April. It was right about when the ceasefire broke out. And the big update about the war in Iran is that there is no major update. We are still in the same state of affairs that we were 3 weeks ago. And I'll reconstruct the timeline for you just very briefly. We'll read through some of the latest developments, and then we'll talk about potentially where this is going. So the last time we spoke, the ceasefire had just been declared. It was on a Tuesday. It was actually 3 weeks ago to the day. And this brought an end to all of the offensive U.S. operations against Iran. Whereas for about 7 weeks, the United States was engaged in this extremely intense air campaign, naval campaign against Iran, its navy, its regime, its military. All of that came to an end 3 weeks ago when a very contentious ceasefire agreement was announced. And the terms of the agreement were these. It effectively said that as long as Iran opened the Strait of Hormuz, then the United States would end military operations. This would take place for a period of 2 weeks for the purpose of reaching a comprehensive long-term peace agreement that addresses these systematic issues of the Strait of Hormuz, the nuclear issue, missiles, proxies, and the continuity of the Iranian regime. That was the original terms of the ceasefire. And the important points are, again, opening up the strait in exchange for a cessation of hostilities for the purpose of finding an agreement. Those are the 3 big parts of that agreement. Now, you might remember that before we left, that agreement effectively fell apart. And almost immediately there was a big debate about what the terms of the deal even were. Iran and Pakistan, which brokered the deal, seemed to be under the impression that included in the ceasefire was also a ceasefire in Lebanon. Israel had engaged Hezbollah in a major military campaign in southern Lebanon. It displaced over 1 million people. Iran and Pakistan said almost an hour, 2 hours after the ceasefire was announced that the ceasefire did not just apply to the fighting in Iran and in the Persian Gulf, but also to the theater in Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah. Well, the United States came out the following day and said that is not a part of the deal, and Israel would not agree to a ceasefire in Lebanon. And so as quickly as the deal was announced, it was rescinded. And Iran came out and said, well, if there's no ceasefire in Lebanon, then we're closing the strait again, which they then did. And the strait was open for all of a few days before it shut right back down. The United States denied this was happening, but it became obvious after a few days. That following weekend, there was a series of negotiations in Islamabad in Pakistan. That Saturday, so this is, again, 2 weeks ago from this previous Saturday, J.D. Vance, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff traveled to the capital of Pakistan to meet with the delegation from Iran to negotiate this comprehensive agreement. That was the purpose of the ceasefire. Well, the negotiations went on all day and all night, and in the end, they didn't reach an agreement at all. And actually, the Iranian delegation was so insulted, they said there is no basis for diplomacy. We're not going to make a deal with the United States. They're being unreasonable. And so Iran effectively pulled out of negotiations. Throughout that following week, there was all sorts of talk about another round of negotiations any day. That Thursday, that weekend, it never materialized. Finally, the second week of the ceasefire approached, this is last week, and still there were no negotiations. There was supposed to be a last-minute round of negotiations in Pakistan. That was called off. The ceasefire was set to expire. And again, even though none of the conditions were reached, Strait of Hormuz remains closed, no comprehensive agreement, and actually there weren't even negotiations ongoing. Last week, Trump extended the ceasefire indefinitely. So even though that 2-week period was set to draw down last week, even though Iran did not abide by any of the terms, Strait is closed, no negotiations, no comprehensive agreement, no progress towards one, Trump unilaterally said last week, well, the ceasefire is extended, and it is extended without limits. There is no timeline anymore. And what's interesting about this is that for this entire time, let's say this period of the past 6 weeks, we've been operating on these rolling deadlines and rolling timelines. You had the week before Easter, Trump said that Iran had 48 hours to open up the strait, or else we would escalate the energy campaign to attack Iran's civilian infrastructure. And then that 48-hour deadline was extended by 5 days, and then 10 days, and then by 24 hours. Then we were under a 2-week ceasefire. And then after the 2-week ceasefire, it has now been extended indefinitely. And so this is why I say, when you consider the war in Iran, if you actually approach the official White House statements, Truth Social posts, press releases, the official government line for the past however long that has been is that we have been on this rolling deadline, 48 hours, 5 days, 10 days, 24 hours, 2 weeks. We have been in this protracted negotiation to end the war, and that's why we're not escalating. That's why we're not continuing hostilities. That's why we're engaging Iran in diplomacy. And yet, all this time, nothing has changed. The United States is spinning its wheels, creating deadlines, talking about escalation, talking about terms of negotiation, and yet not one single thing has changed. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed ever since that first deadline was announced. These negotiations have meaningfully happened ever since that first deadline was announced. We're supposed to believe that the United States has been either winding down the operation or refraining from escalating because we're waiting on this diplomatic process to prevail. Because Iran has been making concessions, because they're making commitments to open up the strait, and yet none of that has happened. The strait is closed, no negotiations. Now that we're in this new period, you have to ask, what is even the official line at this point? I think we all recognize that all of those deadlines that existed before were a form of a bluff. It was all bluster. You better do what we want or else. And everybody knew that we weren't actually serious about following through on these threats. All of this was an attempt to either buy time so that we can mobilize more resources or solicit help from other allies, buy time so that the oil markets could adjust and alleviate some of the pain in the markets. Everybody recognized that despite what was being said about a diplomatic breakthrough, about a prospect for a deal or negotiations, we all recognized this was just buying time. But now here we are since last week, and now you don't even know what the official line is exactly. Strait is closed, no negotiations, and yet we're not bombing them. There's no threat of escalation on the table, and there's no negotiations. There's no prospect for a deal to happen, and yet we're in an open-ended ceasefire. Now, this is the latest. This is from the New York Times. The one thing that has changed is that ever since the ceasefire was extended, the United States has imposed its own blockade over Iran. So Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz to shipping that is friendly to the United States. Any shipping that does not coordinate with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and pay a $2 million toll, or a $1 per barrel of oil toll, will not be permitted to transit the strait. While that has been happening, Iran has still been engaging in seaborne trade. So Iran has still been exporting oil, importing things from other countries. They have slowed down and shut down shipping in the strait for every other country. Well, since the ceasefire was extended, this is how the calculation has changed. the United States has imposed a naval blockade of its own. And so now from a distance, we are effectively doing the same thing to Iran that Iran is doing to us. Whereas Iran was shutting down seaborne shipping of oil, natural gas, and other things for allied U.S. countries, now we are shutting down all the seaborne trade for Iran and all their major ports. So they're not able to export their oil, and they're not able to import the goods that they need. And so this, Trump believes, and the White House believes, will reverse the economic pressure. Instead of having the United States and the global oil markets affected by Iran's closure of the strait, we're flipping the script.
I don't think
And
I've
now we're
done
gonna
one
put
fucking
economic
single
pressure
car
on
mission this
Iran's
whole time.
economy by shutting down their
It's only been 3 current
major
missions
naval ports in the Persian Gulf.
for the whole fucking
Now,
time I
this
was
is
playing.
this is from the New York Times about the latest development. Development from this week is that Iran has put forward
Have I done
a
one?
proposal. And what Iran is now saying is that
Yeah, I think so.
they will open up
There's
the
one.
strait as before.
Jesus.
Except that now they're going to retain control over it and they're going to charge a toll in perpetuity. They're saying the strait will open, however, it will be a controlled strait. And there will be a new legal regime governed by Iran and the other country that borders the strait, Oman. They will determine which ships go in and out, and they will have the ability to charge money they'll be able to collect on this. Iran says that in return, the United States has to withdraw its forces from the Middle East, and we have to shelve all of the nuclear negotiations. Iran says that we will consider nuclear enrichment, highly enriched uranium, another day. They say that we will bring an end to the war by opening the strait, but we're going to control it. Now, the United States has rejected that proposal and says that the ceasefire will go on indefinitely, but the blockade will go along with it too. And this is a story from the Times. It says, quote, President Trump has told advisors he is not satisfied with Iran's latest proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and end the war. The proposal called on the United States to end its naval blockade, but would have set aside questions about what to do with Iran's nuclear program. Iran has repeatedly rejected American proposals to suspend its nuclear program and hand over its stockpile of highly enriched uranium. Mr. Trump reviewed the proposal with advisors on Monday after Iran's foreign minister delivered it to Pakistan on Sunday. Mr. Trump rejected another proposal from Iran last week and called off a round of peace talks in Islamabad over the weekend. U.S. officials say Iran's leadership has not authorized negotiators to make concessions on the nuclear deal, which frustrates any attempts to forge a compromise or peace agreement. Delaying nuclear talks could have been a way to reach a quick agreement to ease pressure on global energy and financial markets, but any decision to halt nuclear talks would be a sign that the war had failed to achieve one of its major goals, which is increasing pressure on Tehran to make a deal over its enrichment program. Iranian officials insisted that any deal to open the strait should allow them to continue to impose a tax or fee on ships that transit it. At the heart of the debate over whether to accept the proposal were discussions in the Trump administration about economic leverage and what further American military operations would be needed to get Iran to make significant concessions in negotiations. Some officials believe that continuing the blockade for 2 more months would cause significant long-term damage to Tehran's energy industry. Oil wells cannot be turned on and off and would be damaged if they were forced to shut down, incurring costly repairs. Other administration officials have said that assessment is flawed, noting that Iran's positions have hardened and that the IRGC has solidified its hold on power. So this is where we are at, and like I said, nothing has realistically changed in the past 3 weeks. And the situation is basically this. We have no options. We can't escalate militarily. We cannot nuke them. We cannot invade them. We cannot invade Karg Island. We cannot bomb them into submission. There is realistically no military solution to compel Iran to change its behavior. So what they have come up with instead, because they've been looking for a way to do this in a way that is minimal, and this is a conversation from 3 weeks ago, if we were to, for example, bomb their civilian infrastructure, that might be a military solution. That might be a military option that could compel them to come to the negotiating table and make concessions. If we were to bomb their power grid, bomb their energy infrastructure, that might be a military option that will get them to beg for peace. But if we do that, they retain the capability to do the same thing to Saudi Arabia and the UAE and Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain, and that would devastate not only all those countries, but the global economy. So that's off the table. So the Trump administration was looking for another option. Maybe we will invade one of their islands. We'll invade Karg Island. We'll invade Hormuz Island. We'll try to use a ground force. Maybe we'll deploy forces inside of Iran. But then they determined that if we tried that, Iran would just kill everybody. Because if Iran has enough drones and missiles with precision to shut down shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, surely they can use those drones and missiles to kill everybody that tries to land on one of those small islands, or anybody that lands inside of the Iranian mainland. So they ruled that out. That's too risky. So if we don't have any economic warfare military options, if we don't have any options to do a minimal ground invasion, what can we do to compel them to come to the table? So now Trump has found this new option, which is an economic blockade. If we impose a naval blockade on Iran's ports, then we can squeeze their economy. And without bombing their energy infrastructure, if we shut down their oil exports, then their oil industry will grind to a halt, and it will cost them hundreds of millions of dollars, because that will cause damage to the infrastructure and there will be lost revenue. So the idea is, without a kinetic military option, we're going to increase the pressure on Iran's economy in a way that is less invasive. Well, here's the problem with this. So that is realistically the current situation, is that the strait is closed and the pressure is on the United States. We have now imposed a blockade of our own, shutting down all of Iran's seaborne trade to put some pressure on them. They're waiting us out. We're going to try to wait them out. They're hoping that the economic pain of the closure of the strait will force us to leave them alone and walk away. We are hoping that the pain of closing the strait for them will cause them to come to the negotiating table. Now, the Trump administration realistically can't leave the conflict without some kind of tangible victory here. We set out to achieve regime change, seize their highly enriched uranium, shut down their nuclear centrifuges, shut down their missile program, shut down their proxy network. We have achieved none of these things. So we cannot leave unless we get something. So what we are doing is keeping this going at a low boil. The pressure's on us, but the pressure is also on them, and we're going to try to wait them out so that Iran eventually comes to us and makes concessions on their nuclear program. Now, what are those concessions going to be? Well, there's not a lot of room for negotiation. The Trump administration says they have to give up all their highly enriched uranium, and they have to give up all their enrichment activity. There's no wiggle room. There's no gray area. They cannot retain any of it for any period of time, can't dilute it, which Iran is never going to give up. On Iran's side, all they have to do is wait us out. All they have to do is basically call Trump's bluff. They know this is hurting us more than it's hurting them. And Trump administration officials themselves say it's not going to work. We have no military options. Even if we restarted the bombing, it's not going to fix anything. Even if we restarted the war, it's not going to change their behavior. And even if we blockade all their ports, it's not going to put enough pressure on the regime to capitulate. And that is because since the war started, the IRGC has actually consolidated more power than they had before the war started. So what it is looking like in the future is that the Trump administration is going to have to just walk away. It's not going to work. Iran is still putting out proposals and telling us, look, we're not talking about nuclear. We're not giving anything up. And as a matter of fact, we don't even want to talk about it anymore. We don't want to talk about our missiles, our proxies. The regime isn't going anywhere. And the nuclear issue, we're never giving it up. They said last week, they said our right to nuclear enrichment is no different than our right to our own soil. They said it is just as sacred as our right to our own territory. We're never giving it up. And that is what they have said. They said we are never giving up enrichment. We are never giving up our highly enriched uranium. And the Trump administration can accept nothing less than exactly that. So what does that mean? It means that the current situation will prevail. The strait will remain closed. the blockade will remain in place. And ultimately, it is on either Tehran or Washington to blink first, and time is working against us. It is all of our allied countries that are hurting because of this. It is Europe, it is our allies in the Pacific. They are facing the fuel shortages because of this. And ultimately, that is going to affect the United States economy and political situation, which is far more precarious and fragile than the situation inside Iran. In Iran, they don't have a democracy. In Iran, their people know they're in an existential war for their survival. Over here, this is a war of choice. Most Americans don't support this. Most Americans don't even care. So if in Iran, the Iranian regime is going to impose on people rationing and shortages of vital goods, and the economy is going to get worse, well, one, they have an iron grip on power, and two, their people know the situation, which is it's either this or it's total destruction and no sovereignty. Over here, we have an election in 7 months where the Republicans are very unpopular, and what's more, Americans don't want to pay $5 for a gallon of gas to support a war of choice, to pursue regime change for a limited nuclear deal in Iran. It's just not something that Americans have a political appetite for. So once again, just like over the previous 3 weeks and the other deadlines before that, this is yet another bluff. Just like for the past month, when Trump was saying, we're going to bomb you like you've never been bombed before, we're going to target your power plants and bridges and infrastructure. That was a bluff, and so is this. The administration says, we're going to prepare for a long-term blockade. They're planting stories in the press, and they're leaking to the media saying, we're prepared to go the distance, we're settling in to blockade the strait in perpetuity. And we're good with just shutting down the strait. We're not talking anymore. And Trump thinks that Iran is going to buy that, and they're going to say, oh, well, we better make a deal now. Trump is going to blockade the strait in perpetuity. This is going to cause problems for us. Just one problem, Iran is working with every other country to alleviate all this pressure. They have just opened up 6 new border crossings with Pakistan so that land trade can continue. And Russia says they are prepared to help Iran with whatever they need strategically. So in the meantime, as long as you are in this, as long as we're playing this waiting game of waiting for Iran to come to the table, get off their red line, give us everything we want, in the meantime, they're being resupplied. They're probably building more drones. They have gone to work rebuilding their missile production facilities. They're probably building more drones. And so what is bound to happen is that whenever Trump or Netanyahu gets tired of the waiting game, we are going to provoke hostilities all over again. There's no limited military option. A resumption of the same kind of hostilities is not going to change anything. This blockade is a farce. They know it, we know it, they know we know it. And so probably what is happening is that, and again, time is the operative variable here, we are watching as Iran is consolidating power. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard is consolidating power. They're rebuilding whatever was destroyed. They found a number of unexploded U.S. ordnance, and they're reverse engineering that, and they're getting back to work. They're preparing for the next round. And in the meantime, what is the United States doing? While they tell the press, while they tell the Wall Street Journal that they're settling in for a long blockade, they have deployed a 3rd aircraft carrier strike group to the Middle East. And so now, for the first time since the invasion of Iraq in 2003, you have 3 carrier strike groups active and deployed in the same region in the Middle East. At the same time, you got a ton of military transport aircraft headed to the Middle East. What it looks like, they're not serious about a ceasefire. They're not serious about the blockade. Probably they are restocking and reloading, and they're getting ready to hit Iran all over again. And Trump has been insinuating for some time, saying, we're just going to bomb them again. Those that don't want to make a deal, we're just going to kill them. I don't mind an invasion, he said. I don't have the yips, he said, about boots on the ground. What it's looking like is quietly, maybe while they're reassuring the energy markets, maybe they're pursuing diplomacy on some level. If the Iranian offer now is, listen, we'll open up the strait, just leave us alone, maybe they're still pursuing that seriously, but unless they get that nuclear concession, we're going back to war. And I would imagine maybe sooner rather than later, because we are up against the clock with the midterms coming up in November. So that seems to be where all of this is headed, but it's hard to know what the strategic thinking is exactly inside the White House, because up until this point, we haven't actually gotten any kind of straight talk about this since the beginning. You know, as we've talked about, there was a pretty clear idea at the very beginning that we were going to pound them as hard as possible, the regime is going to collapse, and then we're going to extract all these concessions, and we're going to change the character of the regime. That was the idea at the beginning. But the moment that it became clear that would not happen, now we just have no clue what the strategy is. It's typical Trump, what do they call it? It's typical Taco. Trump always chickens out, which is these maximalist demands, empty and hollow threats, deadlines that are always being extended, you know, doing all this diplomacy in the media, on True Social, by public statement, by press release. And so it's hard actually to peg the administration where they're going to go with this, but I think that you would not be deploying more aircraft carriers to the region if you were done with hostilities. Currently, you got the Lincoln, the Ford, and the H.W. Bush all off the coast of the Middle East. I don't know that you would be deploying an additional carrier strike group if the goal was to end the war as quickly as possible. Like they said today, declare victory unilaterally, just finish the conflict. I don't think we're going to go that way. But I guess we'll have to watch and see what happens this week. But that's that. We're going to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys have to say about all this. Like I said, kind of a slow news week tonight. Not too much going on.